Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, Elixir 1.19 was released, the official release. It's kind of fun, when we announce oh, this is the last RC, and then the next day, the official 1.19 happens.
Yeah, the episode hadn't even dropped yet. And that, and then 1.19.1 is out, before our RC1 announcement even lands.
I know, but we still do have to talk about the cool stuff that's in here. Also, just of note, 4 days after the 1.19 release was a 1.19.1, so it's just a little point release, and that's just a bug fix release. So basically, just jump right to that one. But along with this release, there was an announcement from Jose on Twitter. Then there's also a blog post that goes with this. And then we also have a link to the more detailed changelog. So we'll just talk through some of this stuff. We expect that if you want any more digging into it, you'll go look at some of these resources. But we just want to make sure people are aware of what is in this and why you should care. With this new release, it has enhanced type checking, broader type inference, and up to 4 times faster compilation for large projects. And that's really, I think, where you're going to see the biggest thing is with these compilation of the dependencies and how they've unblocked some of these previous things that caused it to be sequential is with these really large projects. But I think that's where you get some of the biggest benefit. For the type system improvements, this release improves the type system around 2 key areas. It's type inference and type checking of anonymous functions and protocols. And they call out, that might seem really simple on the surface, but it actually required them to develop whole new techniques for doing this type inference on these things. And they say that they will outline these technical details in future articles, but for now, we can talk a little bit more about what they do. So 1.19 now performs inference on all constructs except guards. It was kind of funny because initially the goal was to do just guards. And then they're like, hey, we'll do everything else. But what this does is it takes into account the signatures from calls to functions within the same module and in the Elixir standard library. So this means a previously vague function that takes arg1 and does something with it, where there's no guard, there's no pattern match, there's nothing to tell you what arg1 is. And you're just doing an operation on it. It's very vague, right? And so what they're doing now is when calls like that are happening within the same module, they can look at that other context of those other function calls. This might happen a lot in a def p, some private function you have. They're able to look at what are the other things that are calling this and then be able to infer and figure out, oh, this will always be an integer. So it's an integer and the result of this function will be a Boolean, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. So that one's within the same module, but it's not this type checking in 1.19 isn't limited to just that. So they also add type checking to protocol dispatching and implementations, which is definitely across modules.
Yes.
And probably the biggest one, this is their example in here too. You don't really think about it, but you can construct a string and then interpolate in there, right?
Right.
That's a protocol. That there's a protocol dispatch that's happening there, and it's using the string.cars protocol. And so now there's type checking supported in that thing. So just imagine all the string interpolation you're doing. Now that's covered a little bit more. I went back through my code base a little bit. I was just like, there is a lot of these moments of just string interpolation, error messages, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And then of course, Heeks, Heeks stuff, any EEX stuff, just anything, lots of interpolation in there. And so that's a really clear example of protocol, you just don't know it's happening underneath the covers.
You don't realize that this protocol improvement is going to help you in that you're already using it in all these different ways. It's kind of invisible to you.
Yeah, and so now that's going to be much more, it's just better improved on type checking. And so if you're going to interpolate something that is just not doesn't implement the string interpolation, stuff there, the string.cars protocol, you're going to get that error message now. Whereas before it would just kind of die out in runtime. Another good example is, enumerable. There's a lot of things that implement a enumerable protocol. And so you'll get some more information in there. That comes up a lot, like when you're doing for comprehensions,
Right.
You don't know it that you're using that protocol, but you are. So yeah, those are really good improvements. I think much more weighty, than just guards, right? So if I had to trade here, I think this is a worthwhile trade.
One of the other things that they talked about in the blog post about this type inference and these type checking changes is that they had to make certain trade-offs when you're dealing with these vague times. It's like, am I going to spend more time trying to figure out what this type is, doing more in-depth searching? But one of the things they said is keep in mind that those trade-offs only applies to type inference. And once they introduce type signatures, that's where you're going to be decorating your function, like right before the function header, you're going to do a type declaration. Once you do the declarations, then all those trade-offs no longer apply. Any function with an explicit type signature will be type checked against the user-provided annotations as in any other statically typed language. So you won't be needing to do any of the extra, what can I infer from this?
Yeah,
so that is one of those things I'm really looking forward to, is when that's the language change, right? Everything that Jose and the team have been doing so far is not making a change to the language, to the syntax. At some point in the future, as one of the later steps, but when that happens, that will be very interesting. That's where you'll really start to feel it in like your day-to-day coding. Just you have the option to do these type declarations.
Right. Yeah. A lot of stuff we've been getting so far in these incremental updates has been, just freebie compiler, warnings, and that's it. We haven't talked about the new syntax for annotating your functions. Neither have they. I know they had some ideas, or they had some examples of what it could be like, but nothing really solid yet. So I'm curious where that'll end up landing. One more thing that they support now in this type checking and inference is of anonymous functions. I know there's good strategies, like you definitely want to use an anonymous function here. And one of the maybe the only one I really know is like if you need to query a function, and by that is like you pass it around like it's an argument in your function. You just like I gotta it's dependency injection kind of a thing, right?
Yep.
That's one scenario. But the other scenario is if you need to intentionally obfuscate like error messages that could contain secrets. That's the other one where like anonymous functions could be helpful. But otherwise, I always try to like write them out. And then even the ones where I have to do a dependency injection, I try not to pass the whole function in. I try to pass like an MFA instead.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, anonymous functions though get some additional type checking inference capabilities and warnings, in Elixir 1.19. So you can write these anonymous functions to your heart's content. And they're still regular old functions out there. They're just something that you can, reference in runtime and pass them around. And the compiler will tell you when you've got an in your in your code. So that's pretty cool. That feels like in the compiler sense, like I know the anonymous function has a pass through to like turn that into AST and all. I don't know what happens past that, but it feels like there's a whole nother layer of that thing that reference to that anonymous function being passed around and potentially being called by all these other things. Like you've got all these other call sites that are hard coded to call those functions, but like when you're passing this anonymous function around, it becomes less predictable on what could actually call it, right? And so it seems impressive to me that they're able to accomplish that at all here. Anyway, thought I'd point that out. That seems like a hard problem to solve. So even though I try to avoid anonymous functions, the fact that they seemingly solved it here, that's impressive.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just because anonymous functions are actually everywhere. When I do like an enum, like enum.map, right?
Right.
I'm calling like an ampersand as a shorthand for a really quick, small anonymous function, grabbing the struct.id or something like that.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And I think what you're describing is you hate to see all this complexity get written into these anonymous functions. It's like, just make it a dedicated function, because then it's easier to write a test for too.
That's true. If it's so in those cases of like function capture, like the shorthand there, like if I can get that into one line, then it'll be an anonymous function. I don't care. But if it's like a huge case statement inside of that, where now your anonymous function is like, you're gonna have Credo's gonna yell at you one way or the other, right? Yeah, if it gets to that point, then I'll reference the function. It'll be a local function still, right? It's not an MFA necessarily. It's just a function identity capture there, and it's no longer an anonymous. Well, is it? I guess I don't actually know that, but I don't figure it's an anonymous function anymore. It's a named function. You've given it a name. It's defined in the module. It's just referenced now as if it were. I was like, that's that extra step that I'm talking about though. Like, Anyway, it's very cool.
This episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io, the only security platform with true Elixir support. I sat down with founder Michael Lubis to ask this week's security question. Given all the hype around AI, how worried should we be about AI being used to attack our systems?
Realistically, this is 5 or 10 years away from being a major problem. I know that there's parts in like the model system cards about solving CTF challenges, but like hot take, solving a CTF challenge is very different from like a botnet hacking campaign. I know there's companies doing this as well, but at the end of the day, you could look at a ransomware gang as kind of like a misaligned AI, and they're going to be doing a much better job of that than AI will for the next 10 or 20 years. Recent example from the news is Scattered Spider. It was a bunch of teenagers breaking into companies, stealing money so they could buy unreleased rap music. Not exactly nation state level. I don't think they used 0 days or anything. It was a lot of social engineering. AI will probably get there eventually. But, for the next 10 or 20 years, I think that, humans are pretty good at hacking computers right now. I think that that's a bit of a hype, both for the AI companies and the investors, where it just sounds cool. And it will happen eventually, but you're getting ahead of your skis a little bit if you're worried about that, but you don't have a asset inventory and somebody can just scan your network and find vulnerable computers. That's a much more pressing problem, I would say, for the majority of companies now and for the next 10 years.
Reach out to Michael at Paraxial.io to get personalized security feedback for your projects and your business. That's at Paraxial.io. Another one of those big items that was listed in the blog post for this 1.19 release is the faster compile times in large projects, saying this release includes 2 compiler improvements that can lead to up to 4 times faster builds in large code bases. One of those changes was code loading bottlenecks, and the other one was the parallel compilation of dependencies. The parallel compilation of dependencies is the one I think we talked the most about. Is that process of like pull down a new project or I update my dependency and just do a deps get and you're getting all of them. And you have all these dependencies that really aren't dependent on each other in most cases. So they can be compiled in parallel. So that was one of them. But then there's the other one that we hadn't really talked about, which is the code loading bottlenecks. And the blog post describes it saying, prior to this release, Elixir would load modules as soon as they were defined. However, because the Erlang part of code loading happens within a single process, which is the code server, this would make it a bottleneck, reducing parallelization, especially on large projects. So this change is not about dependencies. This is actually just about I'm making changes to my code, my application logic, and I'm doing recompilations, and this will improve that.
They do have a note in there, though, by the way. The note kind of references something that I feel like would be very cursed. If you run into this, you're doing something very cursed, where you spawn processes in the compilation phase to deal with things. Yeah, I can see it. I don't know. I guess like there's a lot of like macro-y things. I'm thinking about XUnit. Like, what is this doing at compile time to really handle these things? Anyway, I won't dive into that. But if you are spawning processes during compile time, which I keep saying that again, it's like that feels so cursed.
Maybe that kind of stuff is happening when, say, you're using external files like time zone databases or internationalization stuff. And you're like, at compile time, read this file and turn it into a whole bunch of dynamically generated code. I don't know if that's a thing, but like, is that what's going on here?
You know what? You're probably, that's probably a great example. Yeah, because there could be a bunch of definitions out here, and then you're using this module, which will then dynamically, okay, so CLDR basically is toast at this point, right? Anyway, I don't actually know, but there are notes. If any of this is sounding familiar to you, you probably know a lot more about it than I do at this point. So just go check out the notes. They have notes on what to do if your responding process is during compilation phase and how to deal with that now with 1.19, because it has to do with the bottlenecks here on code loading.
Honestly, I didn't know that was an option. Now I want to do it just to see what I can do.
just to be an affront to the gods, right? All right. So next up, we've talked about it a couple times. So we'll highlight it again here. So there's OTP 28 support in 1.19. It officially supports Erlang 28.1. So there's a little black hole of non-support of 28.0 of OTP 28.0. I guess I can't imagine anybody with Elixir at least shipping stuff on 28.0. The regex was a problem there, and so 1.19 is released, which is also, by the way, why this was delayed off of their usual schedule. So 28.1 resolves a lot of that stuff, and so Elixir 1.19 is fully supporting that, and all that is to support a new way of representing our regular expressions. You can now also control how they are escaped into AST if you want to define a new escape callback for your regex things. I don't know when this would be very helpful for folks. Again, I don't know why. I keep on coming back to this. It's like if you're if you're throwing regexes around to a bunch of nodes, like what are you doing? And that feels cursed. So I don't know. All that seems like very complicated stuff, and I'm sure somebody is leveraging the heck out of this, and it's amazing to see that kind of stuff work. But anyway, full 28.1 support, at least in 1.19. When I typically upgrade Elixir, I'm probably upgrading OTP at the same time. Mm-hmm. I do have a small recommendation. Maybe break it up this time. Oh. Maybe upgrade to 1.19 on OTP 27 first, deploy that, see how it goes. It'll probably be fine. And then upgrade to OTP 28.1. And then that way, if you do have problems, it's going to be, it's going to be much more isolated. You just got a smaller surface area to deal with. Limit
the number of changes, sure.
Yeah.
And the last big part of this release is just calling out that this now has full OpenChain certification support. So this is 1.19 is the first release with their OpenChain certification, which brings, obviously, the purpose of it is to bring more transparency and trust to the Beam ecosystem. So they say, in a nutshell, Elixir releases now include Source SBOM, that's a software bill of materials, in Cyclone DX 1.6 and later, and SPDX 2.3 or later formats. So these are, I don't think that there's necessarily a standard, but things seem to be coalescing around like these couples of different standards. And so it's like we support both of these different formats. And each release is attested along with the Source SBOM. So this whole initiative about Elixir and OpenChain certification, that was really announced back in February of 2025. So we're seeing now it's been, a lot of work and effort put into both the Beam and Elixir to make it so now we're at that point where Elixir now has OpenChain certification, which I think is a huge milestone.
Yeah, it was months ago. OTP 28 came out, and I think that was the first one that had all of the same stuff. And now Elixir is coming up in 1.19 with the same thing. And so those are going to check those enterprise boxes about like, what is actually in my software. And this is just at the OTP level and the Elixir level. You still got, if you're shipping things, you still got all your software and all your dependencies to figure out. So that's still a thing. But at least at the language level, you're covered now.
At the end of their little announcement, they just called out a couple things. We talked about one of these last week, which was this mix help app : package, where app could be like Phoenix and : and package would be, LiveView or something like that. But yeah, they just say, with this release, there's additional tooling to mix of mix help module, mix help module.function, mix help module function /arity, a number of these different things, all of them with the intent of being able to take existing documentation that's in the application or the dependency and to make that more human friendly and agent friendly, which I think is cool. It'll be interesting to see how people end up using this. I can kind of imagine you jump into a new project and maybe there's like this little script you run that says, run a series of these commands and concat all this output into an agents file that I'm going to use when I start to look at this project. Just like bootstrap it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Well, I've used all these helpers that are now being exposed through Mix now. I'm sure this is a story everyone can feel to the heart's core, but your LSP stops working. I can't push Shift K anymore and get my docs on enum dot whatever, what's the argument on reduce or something, I don't know, or chunk while, I can never remember, stuff like that. And so I had to go throw open an IEX session and do H enum dot whatever because, right? Okay, well now I don't have to do an IEX session. I could just do mix help that thing and be done and get it right then and there directly from the terminal. Yeah.
If you want any more in-depth details, these blog posts and the changelog, they have a lot of code samples too, demonstrating these concepts and how it actually applies to any code you might have in your project. So we have links to all those resources.
All right. Well, that was 1.19 in a nutshell, right? There's lots more. Go check it out. This next thing we're talking about, very small item. So ExDocs is going to get a visual update, just a little bit, just a touch, right? If you ever see those admonition blocks, that's a hard thing for me to say, admonition blocks. I don't see it and say, ooh, that's an admonition block. I just see it. I see call out or something. Those are call outs to me.
It's a call out. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can have different kinds of callouts. You can have info, error, tips, blue, red, orange, that kind of stuff, right? Just to notate kind of like what their severity is. And it kind of mirrors a little bit of what GitHub does in their ecosystem. Anyway, the styling for those in ExDocs has been, it's been fine. But somebody came around and said it could be better. And so now, in just a visual way, they're going to stand out a little less or a little, what is it? What's the I'm sure there's a design term for it, but basically you scroll down the page and you're going to get this splash of vibrant color. It's going to be a big blue header and then a nice, pleasant shade of blue as the body of that call out. That was before. In the after, it's now the whole block will be that nice shade of blue, and the header will just be larger, but it won't be such a gunshot of color, right?
It is a large visual break. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it could be. I guess that's here's my my professional design term for it. It's not going to shoot you in the face with so much color all at once as you're scrolling down, right? And that applies to dark mode as well. And so generally, it's just going to be more consistent between light mode and dark mode, which is really cool. Dark modes, it felt like it was inverse, not the whole color, but like if you do code examples inside of the callout blocks, like that would be more colorful than the actual callout like text around it. Anyway, it was a little weird. So now I feel like that's been fixed in this. So if you ever feel like that you come across something that's just like not aesthetically pleasing in ExDocs, you can fix that. Like it's actually pretty easy to fix that. So good shout out to David Oliver who opened up this PR and contributed that change. And I'm very appreciative of that. So the next versions of ExDocs will come out with a little bit better call out styling.
Yeah. And when that does land, just remember, you don't have to republish your library to republish your docs. You can just update ExDocs and republish that. And, it automatically, people get a better experience. And next up, the Phoenix LiveView component library called Mishka Chelekom. I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. They had a recent update to version 0.0.8. I did a double take. It's like, wow, that is a really low number. But don't let that fool you in terms of how big this update is. What their update is focusing on is support for Tailwind 4, Phoenix 1.8, and the latest LiveView version. They call it out saying their biggest challenge in this version, which was a lot of work, a lot of changes, was optimizing the entire library from the previous Tailwind version to version 4. As you know, the CSS utility framework has undergone significant changes that essentially deprecated much of their previous code, forcing them to identify and resolve these issues. So if you are using this library and you're also saying, well, I want to be on Tailwind 4, then, you start getting version dependency issues. And, it's like, maybe I can't move up. So anyway, it was just cool to see that this LiveView component library is continuing to see some love and get some updates.
Yeah, hopefully that 21,000 lines of code wasn't in one PR.
Oof, I wouldn't review that.
Yeah.
All right, and now let's shift over to some industry news, which still has relevance to us. But, there's a lot that happened in this last little while, and a bunch of it we're not going to talk about. But I just kind of felt like some of these things were so big, you just kind of have to talk about it at least to acknowledge it. Like there was an AWS outage on, I think it was October 20th. And, I heard about it, like my kids in school. Canvas, the software used in the United States. I don't know how, I think it's just limited there. But it's a software they use for students accessing assignments and stuff. It was down for most of the day. So they had to get paper handouts. And like,
what?
I know. I'm like, how did the teachers get those printed? So anyway, that was like one of those things where, people, just regular people feel it because, there were outages for Roblox and Fortnite, along with other much, news organizations and stuff too, but those are much shorter outages. Anyway, I'm sure if you felt it and you knew it. But the other one that I thought was interesting is GitHub announced that they are going to be moving their infrastructure over to Azure. So when Microsoft bought GitHub, they pretty much stayed true to their commitment of saying, we're really not going to touch anything. It's working well. We're not going to mess with it. Well, now they're messing with it.
It's true for a while.
That's what always happens. It's like true up to a point. And then they're like, okay, yeah, we really want to fold this in. Yeah. So they said it's going to be like a 1 to 2 year business process. And it's like they're shutting down all work on new features. They're like, this is our top priority. So I'm just interested to see how much people feel it or don't. Does this go smoothly? Or do your CI stuff start breaking when the machines that you're using start to get migrated over? It'll be interesting to see. But just heads up that GitHub will be moving to Azure, which is a complete infrastructure move.
Lots of pagers going off. That's all I like in Microsoft headquarters. Just pager duty, just everywhere, getting overtime. The AWS outage is like you couldn't shop on Amazon either. Like,
wow.
Like that affected them too. There as well. You would search for something and nothing would show up.
Wow.
It's like, so yeah, they probably felt that in a lot of ways, not just their customers, but I don't even want to guess. It would probably be too depressing to actually know the real number of how much money Amazon lost that day because they couldn't even have their storefront give you results and stuff.
And I do appreciate that Amazon is sometimes fairly transparent with what happened. And, they say, this is what happened, this is how we fixed it, and this is what we're doing to make sure it never happens again. Well, something always happens again because it keeps happening. I would just hate so bad to be like responsible in some way for an outage that everyone is feeling like that.
Yeah, we've got 3 redundant validation services on line 2 of that one config file over there. But dang it, we forgot about line 3,
Yep.
Yeah, lots of people felt that one. And another bit of industry news is ClaudeCode is now on the web and on your phone. Ooh, wow. So now you can walk the dog and develop that cool new app in your brain. To a point. It's actually pretty severely limited. So if you're an Anthropic customer, by the way, they're like a $7 billion company at this point, right? They're one of the large ones, especially in the coding space. So if you have ever dealt with any of those AI agents, you are probably dealing with ClaudeCode, or at least some point. And so you may be familiar with ClaudeCode CLI. It's that you npm install this thing, right? And then it's got the full access to your file system and all. Even though they try to self-constrain, it's still you on your computer with all your things. And so one of those, suggestions is to containerize it, right? And so some folks have done that and successfully and still running locally. You just kind of allow list things that the container can access. Very smart way of dealing with that. Well, now they're productizing that a little bit and calling that ClaudeCode Web or ClaudeCode iOS, I guess. I don't know. And so they have a new interface. So you can go to Claude, I forget the address, but it's like /code/web now. We'll have it in the show notes. We've got links to the YouTube video that illustrates it and their news article about it as well. So if you can imagine a very slimmed down version of the ClaudeCode CLI, it's still a prompt, but this one is much more focused on connecting to your GitHub repos. And so you install their app, into your org or your account, and you give it access to some or all of your repos. And I think maybe the primary way as of today that you would use it is by having it connect to your repo and say, hey, look, there's issue 123 is open. Please go look at issue 123. And it would go look at it and it would just try to solve it. And it's much more of that YOLO mode, by the way. So like you don't have the same kind of like capability of like putting it into thinking or planning mode or something like that. It's more like, I need you to go asynchronously do this. I'm gonna go watch some TV, you know. And it'll do all right. If anyone has done the YOLO, you know, vibe coding stuff here, you know, you're going to get some very mixed results here. You'll have to backtrack a lot, you know, I think, and tell it, okay, you did a lot here, but we have to undo it and do it this other way. But it is pretty neat in the sense that they basically self-containerized and hosted it on the web and can do this asynchronously. So you can have multiple sessions. Like, it's a big part of their UI is to have multiple of these sessions going on different things, you know. Could be on the same repo, but it's multiple sessions going and working their magic. I tried it out the other day. It is limited. It's severely handicapped in the sense of how effective it can be. So here's the big example. It's containerized and it's on the web. So it's not on your computer with your tools, with your MCPs, with your Elixir, with your Hex, with your Tidewave, you know, all that kind of stuff. I was having to do some things and I realized, okay, it was going through 10 examples and it was replicating this pattern 10 times, one for each of the examples. And I stopped it at example 3 when I realized, it's like, you actually haven't run anything. I need you to run this to make sure it actually works. And it couldn't, because it doesn't have any of the tools. It's almost as if the container is just pure BusyBox with some GitHub credentials in there, and that's it. So there's no Elixir on there, there's no Docker, there's nothing else. And as far as I can tell, there is not a way to give it more tools. So if you're hoping for it to be able to validate any of its work, which is quite important for any quality work out of here, you're not going to find it quite yet. And all of this applies to the iOS app version as well. It's almost the same. And so anyway, but it is pretty cool to see it, right? This is the beginning, of course, right? All the beginning stuff is almost useless at the beginning, but I could really see where this could go. So if I liken it to like GitHub and GitHub Actions, right, very flexible, and they run it on their infrastructure. That's their whole thing, right? And that's where they want to get some money. You know, that's the product for them. But GitHub Actions even allows you to plug in your own runners, quote unquote, right? And so that's your hardware with the GitHub Action, you know, with the software on it. And they just coordinate, you know, from GitHub, the products GitHub will tap into your hardware and have it run the jobs. And you can customize your hardware in all the ways that the GitHub runner software allows you to. And this is where I think that the opportunity could be for Anthropic is to allow them to tap into your runners, and your runners could have your software on there, your MCPs, that kind of stuff. And in that case, that could be much more useful.
Yeah, but then it's your isolated container too.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, which would be the best of both worlds. So if they get that to work, that'd be great. Because then it's not your computer with your family photos and, you know, all that stuff, all the stuff that you're just afraid that they're going to be mining from you to learn and, you know, retrain their models and all that kind of stuff. All right. Well, that's a lot about some proprietary stuff out there, but that's ClaudeCode on the web. And then, you know, I have not talked about the iOS app a lot. There's not much to it, but just know you could walk the dog and check in on some session that you have Claude working on from your phone. Again, I still don't know why, but hey, whatever.
And the last industry news item, honestly, this one I wanted to talk about because I think it opens up a bigger discussion just to think about. This was specifically about Redis, and there was a CVE of a whopping 10.0. So you cannot get worse than this in terms of the score of how bad it is. And so what it is when you install Redis, it has a built-in feature that it can execute Lua code. And it runs this Lua code in the little sandbox. And that Lua feature is turned on by default. And that feature has been there for many years. So if you have Redis installed at all, this is a vulnerability that exists unless you've already updated. So, okay, you're like, that's fine. But my Redis is like behind a firewall. It's not public. Well, apparently, just by doing some internet IP scans, you see there's about 330,000 publicly exposed Redis servers.
It's a lot.
What this vulnerability is an attacker can use the Lua code to do a sandbox escape from the Lua sandbox and then they end up having root on the underlying machine. You might say, well, our company doesn't have a Redis server. It's not public. It's on a private network, only accessible from our other application servers. It's like, that's the right way to do it. That's what these 330,000 people should have done. And typically when you have a Redis server like that, you don't have credentials like a username and password on it because it's private. And so you're just able to, if your application can hit that IP, then you're talking to Redis. Well, what happens a lot of times is an attacker may breach a web server, like through an Elixir or PHP or Ruby on Rails, something. They get some kind of breach in, but that machine that they're now have access to is locked down. They really can't do anything with it. So the first thing they do is, I have very limited permissions, very limited access. What else can I see? And so they're just scanning to see what else is in this network that I now have access to, that now have visibility into. And that's where they pivot inside a network. And if they see this Redis server, they can now just immediately own that box. And now they have a persistent setup in the private network.
And that likely means that, like, if you have several services, like sharing some sort of, cache or, using it as a pub sub, now they can probably access, because that Redis service would be...
It's a central point.
Yeah.
And a lot of the data that's going through it is probably sensitive as well. There's that aspect too. So the fix is just to update to 8.2.2 or later. So if you have Redis, yes, it's vulnerable unless you've already updated. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because, you're not listening to the Thinking Elixir podcast because you want to stay up to date on the latest security stuff. We're not timely enough to give you that kind of up to the minute information on that. That's not why you're listening. The reason I think it's important to think about this, have you ever worked at one of those shops? And I think of this small and medium-sized businesses where it's DevOps, right? You are an engineer there and you don't have a dedicated operations team or dedicated security team. It's DevOps. The developers are doing the operations. I've worked at plenty of places like that. Well, here's where I think it's may not be an awesome thing. Because, as a developer, as a senior developer even, I'm involved with the architecture of the whole system, with the services and the architecture of the applications. And I spend a lot of time answering questions and giving guidance about how to do the application. And then I'm also trying to stay on top of what's the latest with all the tools that we use, be that AI development tools, or what's the latest with our front end, if that's the latest with React, or the latest Phoenix or Elixir or LiveView. I'm having to stay on top of all that stuff. But I don't know many developers who do DevOps who are saying, yes, I recognize that we have Postgres, we have MySQL, we have Redis, we have every single piece of tech that you use, that I'm subscribed to their security notifications. We just aren't. It's already too much that you're trying to stay on top of. So I kind of think saying DevOps, well, we're just going to make the developers responsible for that. I think that's asking a lot of people who are already trying to stay focused on something just central to the developer aspect of their job.
Yeah.
What I think is happening then is you're going to have a lot of these companies, small and medium-sized businesses, that a Redis vulnerability like this happens, and they're just not going to know about it because they don't have anyone who's tuned into that kind of security notification. Now, this particular issue, it got a lot of press. So people they will hear about it through Hacker News or Slashdot or some other medium like that.
Yeah, one way I've seen some organizations handle that is to have security, what do they call it?
Security officer kind of thing?
It's, not across the whole company, but in your slice of the stack, right? If you can imagine a lot of that, the subject matter expert, SME, that was it. SME, so if you're the SME, that also comes with the responsibility of, this would be an official role, right? So if you are the SME for this thing, officially, you are also the security-minded person for it. So when the security people of the company, say, hey, what's our risk of this thing? They would get all the SMEs into one very costly meeting, and they would, and each of them would be the owner of that answer for their slice of the stack.
Right.
That doesn't alleviate all the problems that you're talking about, though, because that means that all of these probably just regular old software, engineer people that just love their Python or love their Elixir or something, they like you said, that they have to be on top of all of the things that they are also using in their slice of the stack. So you get into that problem of like, well, if the whole company is using Redis or if the whole company is using Postgres, then that means nobody's the SME on that, right? Because everybody's using it. There's no one person that's really ultimately responsible for it. That's where like the traditional like DevOps person would be, you know, that owner of those kinds of pieces. A little separately, I'm a little confused of, okay, so I get the CVE, I get why it's, you know, Redis is posting it because they have a huge footprint here. It's a little unclear to me. Is this a Lua issue? Because that just at face value says like, cool, Redis has a feature that allows you to use Lua scripting and inside of it. That's pretty neat. But that sounded like a Lua issue, that you could escape Lua's sandbox and that Redis is just a user of it. It's like poor Reddit, right? We're a victim of some other software that they use. I don't think that's entirely it, though, because there is a Redis feature here called use after free, I think, right? Or this is where I might be getting it wrong.
So the security vulnerability is a use after free. That's the vulnerability type.
Right.
Where it's like a memory corruption.
Is that in Lua's side or is that Redis's use of Lua?
And I was not clear on that either. Like, where is the actual responsibility for where the problem is? Is it Lua? Is it Redis? Is it the integration of Lua and Redis? You know? Yeah,
because here's where I'm going with that is like, okay, is this, I get it. I need to upgrade Redis. It sounds like it's a Redis side thing because Redis has all these patches of things and maybe it's as simple as turning the default to false or something, right? So you can't use Lua. But if this is a Lua issue, then there's plenty of other things that use Lua for the exact reason of being sandboxed. And if it turns out they're not sandboxed, then all of them are going to have this problem too, right?
It's true. It's true. And because I haven't been hearing it talked about like that. Oh, and the other thing is the details on the exploit, like, you know, proof of concept code, none of that's been released yet because it's like responsible disclosure. Because as soon as that's out, then all the script kiddies and, you know, it's just going to be a free for all. So like, it's just trying to delay the inevitable tide wave of requests that are going to come in to try and breach this. So yeah, it's like right now it's kind of vague still.
So good luck, everybody.
Anyway, I salute you all out there, you developer who is listening. It's a big responsibility. It's fun. We do it because we love it. It's fun to solve problems, to create something that's meaningful, that improves people's lives. But darn it, it's complicated too.
Between AWS outages and Redis CVEs and all, we'll get there one day. Where the great software in the sky, where everything's pristine and never needs maintenance.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.